Good morning.
All right, who's ready to have a great morning? Awesome. So this is Dr. Phil Smith.
And this is Dr. Amar Dhillon, and this is Diane, Margarita, Chrissy. We got Brooke, Kaylee, Jesse, Marina is coming back out of maternity for one day, Tracy, and this is our exercise mic right there. All right. So thanks very much to the team. Thanks to all the vendors. And thanks to our special guest speakers who will formally introduce in a minute.
It's good to get excited. We're definitely excited about the amazing second annual Durham Food, Health and Wellness Forum ahead. We have provided you with an online agenda, so if you guys go to welcometowellness.ca, you'll see a copy of the itinerary and agenda. And along with other amazing prizes, you're going to have a Welcome to Wellness notepad in your loop bag. So feel free to take that out and write questions down that you'll have for the speakers, and just submit those to somebody in the Welcome to Wellness team. And for those of you who have provided us with your email during the sign-in process, you'll be emailed the 21-day Eat Clean Challenge as well.
So just grab your, this is one place where we want you to get your phone out. So grab your phone and go to welcometowellness.ca.
What if you don't have a smartphone?
If you don't have a smartphone, then look at your neighbor that does. And they're going to show you right down when you get to welcometowellness.ca, you're going to scroll down, and then you're going to see download event agenda, and that will have everything that we're going to do today, in case you're wondering what are they going to do next. Okay, so that's a new feature. And then and thanks to Diane, most people that signed up early, they should have received this already. And if you come to any of our events, this is how the format will go. You will see what's happening before you get there. All right, so our goal is to get you more than excited. And you know, this is about actually giving you information. I always like to say that you need to take action with the knowledge that you have to get the results. And that's what this forum is meant for. And we're hosting this because we need people to know the truth about what's going on with our food, the business of food, and how health is not in a good way. And right now, the people in Canada, are we getting healthier or sicker? And why is it happening that we're getting sicker? We think that a big reason why is that you've been lied to by your politicians about the food safety system. You've been lied to about the companies that are responsible for producing your food, and it's all for profit. Dr. Chopra and Rachel will probably speak to that. So it's going to take a united voice. It can't just be the people that are speaking on the stage to make this change happen, though, and it's you that we're counting on to help us propel this mission. We're all on the same mission, in my opinion. We need to change the laws in Canada. Right now, there are 150 countries that have signed an environmental protection agreement with businesses to hold them accountable, and Canada is not one of them. Rachel might speak to that. Okay.
So how are we actually going to change things? It always starts with information. So today we're going to equip you with knowledge that we would like you to share with others in our community. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but your body is self-healing and self-repairing. The power that made the body is the power that heals the body, and that's what we believe in more than anything else. You all know that we came from two cells, one from mom, one from dad, and as adults, we're 70 trillion cell organisms. So we have to make sure that system is working at its highest capacity, and that's what we're going to talk about during our 5 fundamentals talk later on. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Dr. Phil, exactly how do we generate and replace those old damaged cells with new ones?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So what you eat, we really like to say at Welcome to Wellness, it's what you ingest is what your new cells are made from. And like Dr. Amar said, it's way more than 1 million cells per minute that you're replacing. So that food you ate last night for dinner, the food you ate for breakfast, that's making your new cells. Your skin cells are going to be brand new, and David will speak to this, David Brooke, and probably Dr. Narini as well, being a plastic surgeon and doing a lot of skin work. Is that your 4 to 5 weeks, all the food you just ate is going to be those cells on your body and on your face. So your liver, for instance, will take, a year to a year and a half to totally regenerate. There won't be a cell that's the same. So what you're eating, you get a second chance if you've messed up till now. there's a second chance because you can replace those damaged cells with healthy cells. In fact, you're going to replace about 500 million cells just during this forum. Okay, so we need you to know this information so we can save the life of everybody that's here, and then you can let other people, because we really think we're saving lives ahead of time.
So today we'll be talking about fundamentals 3 and 5. So these are the 5 fundamentals, they're all in your agenda. Today we're going to talk about nutrition and detoxifying, but we're going to give you more information about the other fundamentals when you come in for those 5 fundamental talks. And the reason that we decided to do a forum for these specific fundamentals is because we want to develop a community of like-minded people that are interested in preserving real food. Who wants to eat real food rather than all that process? Yeah, exactly. So it starts with us. It starts with us sharing this information with our community. So what I'm just going to remind you as well that we don't want to, we're limited for time with the questions while the speakers are speaking, but if you have questions, just write them down and we'll make sure with our open table discussion at the end that those questions get answered. And with Rachel, she represents Kids Right to Know. She has a table outside there, so we recommend that and suggest that you guys donate some money towards that. So Dr. Phil and I are so proud to have Rachel speak with us today. She has had great courage and strength to speak out against very powerful big pharma companies, starting at just the age of 11. We are including her link to the debate that she had on national TV with Kevin O'Leary. Everyone knows how scary he is. And she's saving lives ahead of time by arming people with this information. So let's give Rachel a big hand.
This is Rachel.
She used to tell me about a time when buying and eating food wasn't a mystery. She knew what she was eating. Corn was 100% corn. Strawberries were 100% strawberries. But that's not how it is for me or anyone living in North America today. These days, it seems like you need to be a scientist to be able to tell which food is genetically modified and which is not. Food was first genetically modified in the early 90s. According to Dr. David Suzuki, GMO crops, when first introduced, were touted as the answer to world hunger. The argument was that by developing pesticide and herbicide-resistant crops, farmers would be able to increase their yields and decrease their costs. This has not been proven the case. I see the importance of technology, as long as it's ethical, and I appreciate science as long as it's responsible. As we live our lives enjoying the conveniences of advanced technology and science, we must stop to consider what the true cost will be on our environment, our ecosystem, and our health. So many people think, but you can't fight the government or multinational corporations. I say, watch me, and better yet, join me. Believe it or not, there are companies out there that also really care about this and take action by making a positive change. There are organizations and people, just like me, who want to leave this planet in a better state than how we found it. I ask myself, what would happen if I didn't stand up for our right to know what's in our food? It was this profound thought that moved me. I'm a 15-year-old food safety activist fighting for the right to know what's in our food. I'm on a relentless pursuit to make GMO labeling a law here in Canada.
Today. All right, it's good to hear. Who's excited to learn about agriculture? So some of the dread you guys might be feeling when you're thinking about the agricultural system, I originally used to feel that. Growing up, I knew nothing about our food, where it came from, or why it was important. But I started to learn along this journey, and that's what I want to teach you all about today. Our world is sort of changing to a state that we've never really seen before. I mean, we're seeing more destruction of our environment, our health. We're even seeing more corporate control than we've ever had before. And this isn't the world that generations before us had to deal with. This is all sort of new. And we've reached a point in which we have a fleeting moment to make a change our ways. And if we let that moment pass, we allow corporations to take over our health and ultimately our freedom. And a large part of the changes that we've seen in our world have to do with our agricultural system. When my grandmother was growing up, she didn't have to worry about whether the food was genetically modified and chemically made in a lab or if it was naturally and organically grown. But since then, our agriculture has completely changed. We've moved towards an industrialized, monocropped, genetically modified, chemical agriculture that is not benefiting anybody except for the corporations. And it's a very easy way for them to make quick profits. And the story of our food system has become so much more than just about what we're putting in our bodies. It's become about our seed sovereignty and our health, and really our fundamental freedoms. This story has become about protecting our earth from the grasp of these chemical corporations who care nothing more than about the profits that they make. And so, corporations are influencing the way that we eat every day, the way that we see food, the way that we crave it. And right at the center of that conversation is GMOs and how they impact our health and the environment. And so who here knows what a GMO is? Raise your hand. Okay, so majority of us. I have a quick video here from David Suzuki, and he really makes it simple and easy to understand, even though GMOs can be very technical and complicated. So we'll just play the next video.
David Suzuki joins me in the studio. I want to ask you first, you described our consumption of genetically modified food as a massive experiment. That's what science is about, experiments. What's your primary concern about this one?
Well, the point I make is that we have no idea what the long-term consequences of these genetic manipulations will be on the public. There is no way that our health authorities can test all possible combinations and permutations over a large enough population over a long enough period to be able to say with assurity that they're harmless. So basically, by slipping it into our food without our knowledge, without any indication that there are genetically modified organisms in our food, we are now unwittingly part of a massive experiment. Over years, as thousands and thousands of people continue to consume this, we will provide the data which will allow us ultimately to conclude whether or not there's any danger.
In improving the foods that it has, Health Canada says that they've looked for toxins and allergens, but that essentially at the end of it, a potato is a potato, and if it doesn't have either one of those things in it, it's safe.
Yes.
Why isn't it?
Well, essentially the U.S. FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has said that genetically modified organisms or food are basically not much different from regular food, and so they'll be treated in the same way. The problem is this: geneticists follow the inheritance of genes in what we call a vertical fashion. You breed a male and female, you follow their offspring, you breed them, you follow it on down, within a species. What biotechnology allows us to do is to take genes from this organism and move it, what we call horizontally, into a totally unrelated species. Now, David Suzuki doesn't normally mate with a carrot plant and exchange genes. What biotechnology allows us to do is to switch genes from one to the other without regard to the biological constraints.
Now, I mean, you're a geneticist, you know this field better than any of us. Why is that of particular concern?
Well, the problem is this. You see, it's very, very bad science. We assume that the principles governing the inheritance of genes, vertically, applies when you move genes laterally or horizontally. There's absolutely no reason to make that conclusion. We've got to do much more experimentation.
And yet we're dealing with such small bits.
Oh, sure. But one of those small bits can determine the difference between whether you're, in a human being, a mutation can determine whether you're crippled or you die. I mean, because they're tiny, a tiny part of it doesn't mean they are not potent. And the point is, when you move a gene, one tiny gene, as you say, out of this organism into a different one, you change completely its context. And there is no way at the present time that we can predict how that's going to behave and what the outcome will be. We think that we're designing these life forms, but it's like taking the Toronto Symphony Orchestra prepared to play a Beethoven symphony. And then you take some taiko drummers over here, and you flip them over in with the Toronto Symphony, and you say, play music. Well, what comes out is going to be something very, very different from either the taiko drums by themselves or the symphony.
Presumably this science is well motivated. They're doing this for the right reasons, whether they say it's to reduce the use of pesticides, to be able to improve crop yields, to be able to, I suppose, fight pests and bugs in our foods in other ways. What's the answer? I mean,
well, that's what the publicists say, is that it's being driven for all of these good things. The fact of the matter is it's being driven by money. tremendous amount of money, speculative money, invested in biotech companies now, and so there's a tremendous amount of pressure to realize some kind of income on that investment, so you can have some real economic exchange here. So it's money that's driving it. You know, they say that it's to help deal with the huge population growth. Well, Wolfenson, the president of the World Bank, says that 1.3 billion human beings live on less than $1 a day. 3 billion people, half the human population, lives on less than $3 a day. Do you think they're going to be able to afford the very expensive genetically engineered foods? A great deal, more than half of the products, say, of Monsanto, are seeds that are generated not to produce more nourishment or to be better tasting, but to allow these plants to be drenched with Monsanto pesticides. Normally those pesticides would kill the grain or the crop, but now they've engineered them to be resistant to those, and they demand to have the Monsanto product put on them. So it's a business excuse. It has nothing to do with improving the quality of life on Earth.
So what should consumers do? What do you do?
Well, I personally think it's too late to put the genie back in the bottle. It's already on us. And so to demand that a stop to all of this and a moratorium be held is really pretty unrealistic. At the very least, in a democratic society, in a civil society, we as consumers ought to be given the choice whether we do or do not want to become part of this massive experiment. So at the very least, surely you could put on the label whether or not there's genetically modified organisms in it.
Has it changed the way you eat?
Definitely. Well, I mean, I've never gone for eating GMOs. I'm alarmed because so much of it has been slipped into our food without any public discussion or awareness. And it's not just in the food you and I eat. Our children are getting it in the various children's foods. And now I see there's a move for Gerber's and Heinz to get away from GMOs in children's foods. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. We've never been given the choice. Now I say it's time at least to give us that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I don't need to speak anymore. He answers all the questions. But all of us here are a little bit more health conscious, and we all understand the importance of our food. So I can say personally, and I'm sure everyone here feels the same, that we're constantly fighting a war to eat healthier food. From the fact that we have propaganda and marketing and advertising from these biotech companies being shoved down our throats, to pesticide-laden foods, to improperly labeled GMOs, and it can be a real struggle to know how to properly nourish our bodies. So a lot of people ask me, how did we get to this point? About 100 years ago, farmers started turning away from traditional farming practices and started turning towards cash crops, easier crops to grow where it was all the same crop. So like corn, soy, canola, for acres and acres. And the problem was that it started to deplete the soil and it started to become ungrowable and infertile. The problem then became that this was around the time of the Great Depression, and we started seeing problems with the Dust Bowls and not only having economic insecurity, but having food insecurity. And this created a lot of problems. Skipping to the end of World War II, petroleum was used a lot during the war. And at the end of the war, they needed to find a new way to use this petroleum, the war industry. And they quickly figured out that petroleum made a great base for a chemical fertilizer because it contains 3 key ingredients that produce the image of healthy crops: potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. Now, the problem was that at first it seems great. It started the whole green revolution, which is the industrialization of our agriculture. And when I first heard that word, the green revolution, it makes you think of an environmental, sort of revolution that's working towards better agriculture, and it couldn't be further from the truth. It was just based on chemical fertilizers that, yes, it did increase production of food in a short amount of time. But the problem became that these plants were weak and they were only getting 3 key nutrients, and we get our nutrients from these crops. So we're eating nutrient deficient foods, and the crops couldn't sustain themselves, so they started having problems with insects and disease and fungus. that couldn't be controlled. So of course, the war industry, now turned chemical industry, was very excited. They could now create fungicides and herbicides and pesticides to combat the problems that they were facing. And this is where our whole industrialization, moving towards GMOs, we started seeing those in the 90s, a few years before I was born. In 96, that was when the first GMO crop came out to our markets. And now they're becoming herbicide resistant, so farmers can spray as much herbicide onto these crops without killing them. And so we're eating weak foods that have been grown in terrible soil since the 30s that are doused in chemicals. And this is wreaking havoc on our bodies and the environment. And in reality, we've been force-fed lies, we've been force-fed genetically altered foods, and it's really making an impact not only on us now, but it will continue to make an impact on the generations to come. And it's really interesting, the biotech companies will continuously try and sell the idea that we need GMOs to feed the world and that they're the answer to our environmental issues and increasing production, and they really want us to believe that they are the answer. So I started this whole journey of mine into our food system about 6 years ago, and that was my first point of research, to really understand if any of their lies were in fact true, because I didn't know what side to be on at the time. And this is what I found. I'm going to start off with glyphosate. So this has been something that's in the news more and more recently. And glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. So I'm sure quite a few of us have seen Roundup. It's a herbicide that they sell it at Home Depot. They sell it in the glass cases. And you've probably seen it. It used to be used on lawns. There were tons of commercials. And it's sprayed widely on tons of crops. They have Roundup Ready crops, which are herbicide resistant. And glyphosate is the key ingredient. Basically, it's been used since the 70s, and its use has doubled from 2001 to 2007 alone. And in fact, in the US alone, 300 million pounds of glyphosate are sprayed every single year. So this is huge amounts of toxic chemicals that are going into our system. In 2015, the WHO came out and said that glyphosate was a probable carcinogen and may be causing cancer in humans. And so glyphosate is sprayed on crops like corn, canola, soy that are herbicide resistant. But it's not only sprayed on those crops, it's also sprayed on about 70 other crops that are not genetically modified, and I'll tell you why. Glyphosate is used as a desiccant. To make that sound simple, it's just used to dry out the crop before harvest. So these are foods like wheat, lentils, chickpeas. And farmers do this so they can harvest it much quicker. The problem is, that means that you are ingesting straight residues of glyphosate with almost every meal. If we're being honest, wheat is a large part of many people's foods, lentils, chickpeas. I'm vegetarian, so I have a lot of lentils and chickpeas and other legumes in my diet to make up for protein. And so I'm sure a lot of you out there are very similar in that way. And we're looking at healthy foods, but let's say you're having a lentil soup. You're eating a chemical soup because there's straight residues of glyphosate. So if you want to look up the list, I encourage everyone to do this. There's 70 crops approved by the EPA for spraying, and you can look up this list. I encourage you to buy all of those foods organically. This is the only way that you can avoid eating straight residues of glyphosate. And it's interesting to note the rise in so many of the issues we're facing in society, cancer, even allergies, autism, the list goes on, since the introduction of glyphosate and GMOs into our food system. Kidney and liver damage has gone through the roof, and my cousin, she actually works in Leamington, in the ER part of the hospital, and she works in a high farming area where glyphosate is widely used, and she said that every single person who comes into the ER has kidney disease or kidney failure. And it's interesting, that correlation between the fact that people who are using glyphosate straight on are facing so many of these problems. The other problem with glyphosate is that it's actually registered as an antibiotic. And this is extremely scary. It's registered as an antibiotic by Monsanto. And Monsanto is one of the largest biotech corporations in the entire world. And I have a story about them later. I went to their shareholder meeting, so we'll get there. The problem with this is there have been many studies that have shown that glyphosate is actually making the use of prescribed medicines less effective. And we're seeing so many outbreaks, especially with factory farming and a lot of the issues with our agricultural system. And people are starting to not respond to antibiotics because we're eating it every single day. We're basically, with every single meal, unless you're buying completely organic, eating unprescribed, unsafe antibiotics. So no wonder why our medicines aren't working anymore. And it's most definitely playing a large role in the reason why we're facing these problems with medications. And on top of that, it's given to animals in factory farms. We have big issues with factory farms and the fact that they're letting out so much of our greenhouse gases and emissions. But on top of that, glyphosate is showing up in coffee creamers, in eggs, in meat, which means that it's being passed on from the animals after they ingest it in their feed. It's not just going through their system. Our bodies and the animals' bodies are absorbing these chemicals. In fact, actually in the United States and in Canada, glyphosate levels in breast milk, in urine, and in blood samples, women who were here in Canada or the US had more than 8 times higher the levels than people who were living in Europe. And this is a huge concern. Our governments have done nothing to protect us against these chemicals. In fact, they've done the complete opposite. They've increased daily tolerable levels to comply with industry needs, rather than looking out for the consumers and us as constituents. And they're putting us in danger by not standing up for us. Who here has also noticed a huge increase in celiac and gluten intolerances? Raise your hand. I know so many people who have either celiac or gluten intolerances, and there's been such a spike in the past few years. Approximately 5% of all North Americans have celiac or severe gluten intolerances. 5% may not seem like a huge number, but it really is. That is our entire population. And 5% of that is a huge chunk. And it never used to be like that. This is a more current issue. And it's interesting. Glyphosate basically works by how it kills the plant is a plant has a shikimate passageway. This sounds complicated, but this passageway allows the plant to absorb nutrients and to create amino acids. Now, when we spray glyphosate onto the plant, it blocks this passageway and it dies. Our cells don't have passageways like a plant, but what we do have is gut flora, and our gut flora has those same passageways. So every time that we are eating glyphosate, it is wreaking havoc on our gut flora, and our gut flora isn't just responsible for absorbing nutrients and digesting our food, it's responsible for our immune system as well. So every time we're eating glyphosate, we're lowering our immune system and our ability to absorb nutrients. And that brings me to the correlation to celiac disease and gluten intolerance. Celiac and gluten intolerance have been linked to imbalances in the gut flora. And these are the known side effects of glyphosate. And so as we're seeing more and more crops being desiccated with glyphosate, wheat being one of the first ones to ever be desiccated with glyphosate, hence why there are so many allergies to wheat and gluten, the amount of allergies that could continue to grow and the severity of them is still yet to be known because there aren't enough tests done. And that's where we need to get. The fact that our government isn't demanding proper testing on foods that we eat every single day is extremely scary. And I visited with a couple of our health ministers, Rona Ambrose and Jane Philpott, and it was really interesting. They said if we ever saw an issue with GMOs or glyphosate, of course we'd feel complied to label or at least regulate properly. And so much evidence has come out, and they have still not done anything about it. Because there's so much lobbying. I actually, in May, there was a bill to label GMOs, and I went to Ottawa to try and lobby politicians. And it was a really interesting experience because I met with an MP, his name is Robert Sopuck, and he told me that even if 99% of his constituents wanted GMOs labeled, he wouldn't do it because it goes against his own moral code. And this is the type of politician that we're facing in our government that doesn't stand up for us or what we demand, even though 8 out of 10 consumers in Canada say that they want mandatory GMO labeling. So you're probably wondering why I talk so much about glyphosate and GMOs and how that relates to the whole speech. When we think of malnourishment and starvation, we often think about someone who is in a developing country who is underweight. Now, this definition is starting to change. Starvation is all around us. With every single bite of food that we take that is nutrient deficient, we're starving our bodies of the nutrients that we need. And according to Dr. Mark Hyman, 30% of all people in North America are deficient in nutrients that come from plant-based diets. Things like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A. That should be easy to obtain. 80% of North Americans are deficient in vitamin D. 90% of people are deficient in omega-3 fats, which are critical for staving off inflammation and regulating blood sugar. And these are things that we should be getting in our everyday foods. 2/3 of Americans, and Canada's statistics are very similar, 2/3 of Americans are considered overweight. 36.5% of Americans are clinically obese. And that number is expected to rise to 42% by 2030. Now, 1 in 3 Americans born after 2000 are expected to get early onset diabetes. And that number with minority groups is 1 in 2. And these are problems that generations before mine never had to deal with. These are problems that going forward are going to affect future generations to come for years. And the one thing that's changed in our society the most is our food. Obesity and obesity-related illnesses like stroke, heart disease, even certain types of cancer currently kill more people than starvation does. And a lot of the obesity we see in the United States is actually because of the lack of nutrients and pesticides and chemicals that are in our food. When we're constantly consuming these empty, toxic calories, our bodies aren't satisfied. They'll keep asking for more, and it's this catch-22 endless cycle that won't end until we really treat our bodies with the respect and really the nutrients that we need. I believe that I have a short video here. Yeah.
Conflict between public health and promoting agriculture plays out across the board. The USDA says to limit your sugar intake, yet has provided over $8 billion in subsidies for corn-based sweeteners since 1995.
It's fair to say that the government is subsidizing the obesity epidemic inadvertently through its subsidies of corn, which gets turned into high fructose corn syrup and all those weird ingredients that you see in processed food, the maltodextrin, the xanthan gum, all those words you can't pronounce. So you have the government in this crazy schizophrenic situation where on the one hand, they're subsidizing precisely the foods that are making us sick, and then on the other, are now on the hook to set the standards for school lunching our kids.
Our governments are subsidizing crops like corn that are going into all of these junk foods. And they're subsidizing all of the health issues that we're facing. On top of that, I mean, our food system has so much impact over our media, over our governments, even over our education systems. Monsanto and other biotech companies are going into schools and they're teaching kids that GMOs are the answer to feed the world, that they're more nutritious, that they're better for the environment. And it's sad to say that a lot of people within my generation do believe that's true because that's the only side that they've heard. They're infiltrating kids as young as kindergarten age with coloring books about GMOs. And it's unfortunate that they've lobbied so much in our government, and that even within our media, when we do protests or when we do events, they're never going to get the same amount of media coverage as other events do, because a lot of the programs on TV are sponsored by food companies. So they can't go against their own interests. On feeding the world, this is a topic that a lot of people ask me about. You're against GMOs, you must be against feeding the world. That's one of the most common things that people tell me. And the fact is, GMOs don't feed the world. They never have, and they never will. They've been around for 20 years now. And yet, our hunger rates are the same and growing in certain areas. GMO crop yields are no better than conventional crops. They're no more nutritious. They don't help the farmers. They're more expensive. And if we look at the case of Indian farmers, this is a huge problem. Farmers in India were convinced to buy BT cotton. This is where they insert BT toxin into the cotton seed. So when the plant grows and a worm tries to eat it, for instance, its stomach can't handle it, and it'll be filled with ulcers, and the bug will die. Now, what ended up happening was that the bugs became resistant to this BT toxin in the plant. And farmers were already in debt from buying the more expensive seed that they have to buy year after year after year because the seeds are patented, and they couldn't sustain themselves. So by Indian law, if a farmer commits suicide, their debt isn't passed on to their family. And as of right now, because of all the failed crop yields, and because of the amount of debt that many of these Indian farmers have gotten into, over 250,000 farmers have already committed suicide, one every 30 minutes approximately. And this is an issue that we're facing. It's creating a poverty of cycle because people cannot afford, especially in developing countries, to continue to buy this seed year after year when it brings them no benefit. And actually, a 2011 United Nations study said that the way to feed the world wasn't through industrialized agriculture and farming. It was actually through helping smallholder farmers develop their non-GMO and organic practices, their traditional farming practices. And they found that after 10 years of introducing agroecology into an area, not only was climate change alleviated, poverty was incredibly lessened, and food production in those areas were actually doubled. The problem on Earth here is not the fact that we have a lack of food. As of right now, we have more than enough food to feed over 9 billion people. The problem is poverty and lack of proper distribution. And it's interesting, we've created this paradox in our society where, on one hand, we have people who are starving themselves through overconsumption. They aren't getting any of the nutrients we need, and it's creating so many health issues. And on the other hand, we have people who don't have any food. And in reality, it's caused by the same corporations, the same governments. It's the fact that we have corporations basically running our world and lobbying governments into buying into their product. And it's really unfortunate that this is the route we've taken. I went to get back to the Monsanto story, I went to the shareholder meeting for Monsanto to see what they had to say. And I obtained proxy from somebody here so that I could go. And the whole experience was really interesting. They try and use intimidation tactics to make you feel less. So they blocked me off. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay, cool. They blocked off an area probably about this big for myself and 3 other women who were going to this meeting. We were just 3 activists, not like I'm very threatening, and the other 3 weren't very threatening either. And they blocked us off and said that we were rioters and that we were going to be violent. So we had to wait in that little box outside in the cold in the winter for about an hour. And the reason they did this was they wanted to make sure we were the last people into the shareholder meeting. And The security measures, they had about 8 security cars all around us. You know in the movies when you like arrive someplace and all the security cars rush around you? It was that sort of experience. And it was really interesting to see how intimidated they were by activists. They didn't want us talking to the other shareholders because they know that their stock is going down. They know that there are issues with their product. So they assign us each handlers. And this handler makes sure that we don't talk to the other shareholders. So I walked into the meeting and I was able to meet Hugh Grant, not the actor, the CEO of Monsanto, and able to say hello to him. And it was interesting to see their strategies to continue the movement with Monsanto and GMOs and this chemical agriculture. What they want to do is influence a plant-based diet, which I think that's the only thing that I've ever agreed with him on, but how he wants to implement a plant-based diet into everyone's life is simply by growing genetically modified soy all around the world. As a way to solve climate change, plants sequester carbon from the atmosphere. They take carbon and bring it into the soil. He says that the way to solve climate change is plant soy all over the world. What he failed to mention was they're already doing that, but by doing that, they're cutting down our Amazon. They're cutting down the rainforest. They're infecting indigenous areas. They're spraying beautiful grasslands and wetlands with pesticides and herbicides that are ruining natural species. And we have species going extinct every single day. And they are part of that problem. Farming has such an incredible influence on climate change and on our environment and how we go forward in the future. And that's not a sustainable way of farming. We can't continue to deplete our earth in order to gain more food and to solve climate change, because in the end that wouldn't work. You can't damage the soil and then say it's going to help with our global warming issues. When soil is damaged, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. So these are the problems that we're facing. And it's interesting, as a young person, I started this whole movement about 6 years ago. I was 12 when I first heard the word GMO, and I could tell you that I didn't care less about agriculture until I found out about the health and environmental risks of GMOs and the pesticides and herbicides being used with them. And it scared me the fact that 64 countries around the world already require mandatory GMO labeling. And Canada and the US don't. We're the only 2 industrialized nations in the entire world that don't. And when I asked my peers if anyone knew what a GMO was, not one hand went up. I asked my teachers if anyone knew what a GMO was, and not one hand went up. Not even my science teacher. And that's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand back and watch as corporations lobbied our governments, went into our education systems, and influenced the media to believe that GMOs were our answer. So I started our first Kids Right to Know March. We had about 250 kids and parents that came out. I was so excited. I was about 13 at the time. And I was like, yes, 250 people. This is amazing. But it was an exciting time, and then moved forward to starting a Twitter account, which you can follow me on. It's @Rachel'sNews. So I encourage everyone to follow me after or now if you have your phones out. We bring out a lot of real information about what's happening within our agricultural system. And after that, I founded Kids Right to Know, our organization, and we've been very focused on gaining mandatory GMO labeling so that everyone has the right to know what's in their food. And in more recent years, trying to create education packages and materials to bring to schools so kids can learn the other side of the story, the real side about what's happening to our environment and to our health. So it's been really interesting, and I think I debated Kevin O'Leary when I was 14, and I think that sort of changed the realm of what I work in, and I feel very honored to be here and to be able to speak because it's presented so many amazing opportunities to spread the word about this important issue that really isn't talked about enough. Food is the one thing that connects us all. None of us would be here without food. It's a part of who we are. It's what we need to live, to thrive. In many countries, food is culture, food is life. And we don't celebrate that enough here. We all depend on food. Food is the one thing that transcends all the barriers that we have around us. It transcends race, gender. It transcends everything because we all depend on it. So we need to preserve it. Because food isn't just about what we put in our bodies, it's about the impact that it's having on the world around us. When you buy something, I encourage everyone to not just think about the instant gratification of what you bought. I know it's fun to go out and buy a chocolate bar and eat it. But think about the impact that it's having locally and globally, and the impact that you're leaving. I've always believed that when we wake up, we have the opportunity to make the world a better or worse place by our decisions, even big or small, it doesn't matter. When you decide to eat Kellogg's cereal in the morning, you're not necessarily having the most wonderful impact on the world because you're supporting the industrialized agriculture system. So I really encourage everyone, when you eat, not only thinking about how it's going to benefit your body, but think about food as a way to benefit our planet, as a way to take action to make our world a more beautiful place, because it has that incredible power. I want to grow up in a world where I wouldn't have to worry about all of these issues. Generations before us never had to. They had their own set of issues, and now this is an issue that's really affecting my generation and the generations to come. I don't want my children to ever have to grow up in a world where they have to worry about the bees going extinct or the monarch butterflies not existing. I don't want them to have to grow up in a world where the soil is too contaminated with herbicides and pesticides to play or to grow food, or where the soil is too infertile. And by your food choices, we make the dream of having none of that become a reality come true. You have that choice with every single bite that you take. I was talking early on in the speech, the story of our food system has become so much more than just what we put in our bodies, and that's so true. But we have to ask ourselves, what will the story of our planet tell, and what will the story of our food system tell 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now? Will it be a story of damage and depletion of our environment? Or will it be a story where we took charge and there was human innovation and we found new ways to grow food and to support real farmers who are caring for the soil and environment? I actually have a quick video. It's kind of funny. I always end it off.
Hi, I'm Michelle Manning, and I'm here asking the good people of Northampton, Massachusetts to take the Monsanto Challenge. Hi there, would you like to take the Monsanto Challenge?
Yes, please.
Indeed.
Hi, would you like to take the Monsanto Challenge?
I would like to talk to you about it.
Well, here's the thing. This is the Monsanto Challenge, and one of them is from an organic farmer, and it's locally grown, and the other was grown with genetically modified seeds made from Monsanto.
How do I tell the difference?
How do I know which is which?
Do you want to just taste one and see which one you think tastes better?
Yeah, sure.
So wait, before you actually take a bite, I want you to know that the corn from Monsanto is genetically modified. It was spliced with a bacterial pesticide called Bt toxin. Are you okay with that?
No. So if I pick the wrong one, is it going to explode in me? I mean, what if I pick the wrong one?
Probably not immediately on the spot.
I'd love to try the corn, but I'd like to try the organic one.
I can't tell you which one that is.
Wouldn't you want to know what you're getting if it's going to make you sick?
That's the problem. Bt toxin may contribute to blood abnormalities like anemia or leukemia, but Monsanto says it's safe. So which one would you like to try first?
I'm brave, but I'm not sure if I'm that brave.
Well, since companies who use products by Monsanto aren't required by law to label those products as genetically modified, we really have no way to know. Would you like to try your corn?
Nope.
Take a chance with it?
No. I will not take a chance on anything genetically modified. Everything else is labeled. People have nutrition facts on food. Why can't they be informed of foods that's been made chemically or manufactured by a company like Monsanto?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because right now in Massachusetts, there happen to be a few bills circulating that require labeling for GM foods.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't we label, why wouldn't we make the decisions ourselves of what we're consuming? Make perfect sense.
Exactly. sense. So go ahead, try it. Take a bite. You look scared.
It just tastes like corn.
Dude, I would never give you GMO corn. That's organically grown from local farmers.
Yeah, it's organic. Organic!
We were lucky enough to buy our corn from an organic farmer, but genetically modified food is everywhere. And right now, there's no way to know for sure if our food is GM-free.
Say no to GMO!
I love this video just because this is, you know, even myself, not knowing anything about our food system, going into this project in grade 6. And that's exactly my reaction. The 2 kids at the end. Is it going to explode in me? Am I going to die? And I think as a movement, we have grown so much and so quickly. The non-GMO and organic movements are the fastest growing movements in the entire world. And we always talk about the negatives of what's happening, but there's so many positives and so many amazing things that we can do to make a difference. When you get home, email your local MP, tell them that you want real agriculture in your area. You can demand glyphosate-free areas, including parks and lawns. So talk to your MPs about this. This is really important. You can ban glyphosate in your areas if your MP is in support. Also, you know, plant a small garden. I know it's cold now, but in the summer, you can have your own little garden. And this, at least, you're starting to produce for yourself as well. Talk to your friends and family. This is the biggest thing. Majority of people still don't know about this problem. And that's why we need to tell every single person that you know. Have a block party and tell your neighbors about it. Bring over non-GMO cookies or organic cookies and say, this is what I baked. I baked it like this because this is having a positive impact on the world versus a negative impact, and explain why. There's so many individual actions, and I encourage everyone. It starts off small. My first speech for an audience was in front of 12 people, a huge audience, and it doesn't have to be a huge impact, a huge action to make a huge impact. Every small action impacts the world in an incredible way. So please take action, and I encourage everyone, every time you take a bite of food, every time you buy something, think, what kind of story do I want my planet to tell? Thank you, everyone.
That was a very inspiring speech. We're going to be bringing up Dr. Narini after Dr. Chopra. Dr. Chopra has, I guess he really started the Canadian Council on Food Sovereignty and Health, and he has a petition, so we're going to email that. You can send that to your local MP and MPP and all the politicians that you know. Any members of Parliament or government officials here? Why do you think that is? So, in my opinion, I'm going to let Dr. Shiv say this instead. So, Dr. Shiv couldn't make it. He's not well, and this guy has the biggest heart. He blew the whistle. He put his whole family in harm's way so that we could actually, I'm not going to cry, Glenn. He put his whole family in harm's way so that we could actually benefit. He's the guy that was on the front line monitoring the food that we eat. He was the head top official, the top medical official on food safety and animal safety and so on and health. And I think this is the very small clip. And this is just at the end. Anybody who wants to see the whole clip, we will make that available.
This is preposterous. We are committing crimes against humanity by adding these toxins to our system. Our governments are corrupt. I mean, governments all over the world are corrupt because corporations have taken over the whole system. They won't let us eat what nature makes for us. They won't let us drink fresh, clean water. They won't let us breathe fresh, clean air because they've contaminated everything.
I just spoke to him yesterday. He was really excited about our lineup of speakers. And so now we bring up my pal with a great name, Dr. Phil Narini, and I'm very excited to have you hear from him. He's very inspiring to listen to, like Rachel. The first, I'll just tell you a quick story, is that I met him because one of our people came in, that we have a mutual patient, and they did great work on, I saw, who did that work on your arm? And they said, Dr. Narini. And you know what? And he said, you know, you should take turmeric curcumin after this, and you should, and all these natural things. I think the patient said, you should stay away from medical anti-inflammatories and all this. I said, who is this? So I found out who that Dr. Narini was, and I said, I got to talk to this guy. And that's the guy right here. He's going to come up, but he's a medical specialist. He's a local surgeon, and great to have a guy like this. He's changed his own life. He did further nutritional research on whole lifestyle improvement. He's changed his own life in a dramatically great way, and loves to hear from him as somebody who's not only a medical doctor going through the conventional system, but to see the advantages of both sides of the equation, if you will. I really think what he's going to share with us is how you're going to be able to save your life ahead of time and the lives of your families. So please welcome Dr. Phil Narini.
Can we go back to that slide, Dr. Shobra? Okay, this is really important because you guys can't read it from down there, and it says, it is our divine right as people of God and our constitutional right as people of Canada to eat and feed our families the food that the earth produces naturally. Isn't that amazing? That's so powerful. I feel like Steve Jobs introducing the new Mac computer here, running on stage. But I love this guy because his name is Phil. And I used to introduce myself as the real Dr. Phil. Now there's the other Dr. Phil. Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. And I also upset at him for putting me after that woman. All right? Because that is amazing. She is a firecracker. They talk about smartphones, but I think that is what smart is about. It's not about phones. Why am I here today? Yes, I'm a plastic surgeon. I have more letters after my name than I do in my name. I do plastic surgery, and most people think that that means that I do facelifts and cosmetic surgery. No, I'm a reconstructive plastic surgeon. Yes, I do cosmetic surgery as well, but we operate on everything from toenails to hair transplants and everything in between. I do lots of hand surgery, I do microsurgery, and the list goes on and on and on and on. I'm a fellow of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. I have extra training in hand and microsurgery. There's only about 600 people on the planet with that designation. Medical doctor. I did a master's degree in science looking at immunology and how that affects us. And all that means nothing. So I'm not sharing that with you to brag. I'm sharing that with you to tell you that most medical doctors have absolutely zero knowledge when it comes to nutrition. And today already, with this amazing presentation, you've heard everything that you need to know. The other Dr. Phil started off with, and I'm going to paraphrase, he said, you need to take the knowledge you have to get the results. And that was so amazing that he said that. He probably doesn't even remember he said that, but I was listening. You need to take the knowledge you have to get the results. Now I'm going to add to that and say, what results? Well, we've already heard that we are what we eat, and the foods that you eat, that you choose to eat, because it's your choice, the foods that you choose to eat can either destroy you, promote disability, an early death, or, on the other side, can bring you clarity of thought, vitality, increase in energy, less likely to develop diseases, and likely have what I like to call healthy longevity, which not means living longer, but it means living a vital, healthy life. A lot of people, so I eat plants, that's all I eat, and a lot of people say, well, you're depriving yourself of the joys of life. And we've heard already, again, that food is what we are. We're here because of food. We celebrate with food. We reward each other with food. It's about family and friends and holidays and survival. So we have the choice to make of what type of foods we're going to eat and what type of foods we're going to ingest. So I'm going to go through my little slide presentation here. Why am I here today? What it said up there was something about Hippocrates Health Institute. Why I'm here today is because I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of the deceptions. I'm sick and tired of the misinformation. I'm sick and tired of you being lied to. Because the answer to death and disability is the choices you make when it comes to food. And it's so hard to get good information and knowledge. So this is paraphrasing from Eternity Watch magazine, that your birthright is health and hope. And we believe that man's purpose on this planet is to enjoy the beauty and splendor of our world in good health. We believe that many lifestyle diseases can be reversed by changing your lifestyle. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the associations between diet and disease, but focus on science. We're going to talk a little bit about, is it really that bad? What's the cost and burden in Canada and North America? And I'm going to answer the question real simple: what is the best diet for human beings? And also give you a little bit of advice on, can you really do it? Right? Or am I just blowing smoke? Next. So there's a little video here which shows what's happened in Canada over the last 14 years. This data stops in 2014. Hopefully the video will show. And it'll show the statistics on what's happened as far as our rates of obesity. So you can see green is 15 to 20%, and then the numbers go from there. And you can see what's happening in Canada. And again, Rachel already told us that we're in the midst of an epidemic of obesity and overweightness. And if we go to the next slide, you'll compare where we were in the year 2000 to where we are in 2014. And I'm pretty sure that we have to find another color now because we're running out of the greater than 35%. Next. So right now, about half of women and a third of men are overweight or obese, and about 50% of our children. And so what? We've got a bunch of happy, fat people. Next slide. I'm just going to tell you one thing. Well, if you're obese, about 20% of cancers are felt to be related to obesity. You probably didn't know that. So there's so many consequences of obesity, and one of them is diabetes. And almost 90% of people living with diabetes, particularly type 2, are either overweight or obese. And that means 9.3% of the North American population. In Canada, 3.4 million people, plus 5.7 million with pre-diabetes. I'll make this real simple for you. Look to your left and look to your right and look in front of you. One of you is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. That scares me. It's pretty rare now in my practice to see anybody who is not. Let me repeat that. When I was a medical student, we used to talk about asking patients about diabetes, and it was pretty unusual for us to see patients with diabetes. I started my practice as a family doctor in '94. I had let me repeat that, one patient with type 1 diabetes, one. And I probably had 10 or 15 that had type 2 diabetes. That's it. Now, it is unusual, let me repeat that, unusual for me to see a patient who is not diabetic or pre-diabetic. What does that cost us in Canada? $14 billion a year just to treat that one disease, which in over 90% of people can be reversed, cured, not treated, cured. Doctors don't like to use that word, cured, or prevented. And if you are in that category, you only need to lose about 5 to 10% of your body weight to get rid of type 2 diabetes. One of the things that really bothers me as well in my practice is when I see people come in and I ask them, are you diabetic? And they'll say, no. And I look at their list and I say, but you're on metformin. So yeah, I take a pill for that. Do you have high blood pressure? No, my blood pressure is great. I went to the doctor last week, he checked it. I'm okay. And there's 3 medicines that they're on for high blood pressure. It's not that your doctors don't love you and care about you. It's that we like to treat disease. We don't talk about curing disease. Today we're talking about preventing and curing. So these are the leading causes of death in perspective. Heart disease is number 1, cancer is number 2, and so on. But if we actually look at what the nice doctors are trying to do to help you, this is what we do to people. This is the list of medication errors, unnecessary surgeries, and so on. If you total all those up, about 250,000 people in North America die every year because we're trying to help you. That's the number 3 cause of death now. And if we look at nutrition, conservatively, we can prevent 1/3 of cancers, heart disease, and stroke, and half of the drugs you take. And if we add those numbers up, and we look at the numbers again, next slide, then about 500,000 people are being killed by just not eating the right food. All of a sudden, it's the number 1 cause of death. And I'll add disability to that, and you're going to see why later. But if we actually look at the numbers better and say, what really is happening? This is really what's happening. So 2/3 of cancers we can wipe out. 9/10 of heart disease. 80% of stroke and unnecessary prescriptions. Now what happens, we are killing about 1.3 million people in North America needlessly. And all of a sudden, cancer and cardiac disease, not a big deal anymore, are they? So, one of my fans, Dr. Colin Campbell, if you haven't watched Forks Over Knives, you should. If you haven't seen Plant Pure Nation, you should. We'll talk about those later. He says that we have abundant evidence to show that 75% of our healthcare costs could be eliminated if the public would just do what the other Dr. Phil said. Take the knowledge you have and get results. The number of deaths related to the 17 leading risk factors in North America, what's number 1? Diet. Next. How about disability? Same thing. Next. So, at this point, can we agree that we have a problem? But a lot of you say, but I eat healthy. I go to health fairs and I drink green juice and I eat non-GMO corn, right? I'm okay. Right? I'm making good food choices. I get my protein every day, and I drink milk because I need calcium, and I eat fish because we heard that we're low on omega-3s, and I follow a low-carb diet. Maybe you're paleo or ketogenic, but you cut the chicken, and you eat the chicken, only the lean stuff, and take the skin off. I don't eat that much red meat, but I follow a Mediterranean diet. Pick one of these. Pick one. I don't care which one. Let's pick Atkins. Right? Carbs are bad. We all know that. Why are carbs bad? Because this guy said carbs are bad. In 1972, he came out and said, eat all the yummy foods you like, eat fat, eat protein, and lose weight. And 30 million people bought the book, and that's why carbs are bad. In 2002, he had a heart attack, and after he was recovering, he said that it wasn't because of his diet, it was related to an infection that he'd had. Then what happened? In 2003, he died of a head injury. Now, the fact of the matter is, he didn't have an autopsy, his family didn't want that. He was 258 pounds, 6 feet tall, BMI of 35, anything over 30 is obesity if you don't know. And before his death, his medical records showed that he had hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and a heart attack. He was 72. My theory is that he was walking outside his office and he did one of these, slipped and fell, struck his head, and that's how Dr. Atkins died. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. It starts off with me meeting a really cute, fit girl who actually is working on opening up her own yoga studio right now. And she's an athlete and I'm not. And then I had a few more than 50 birthdays. And then I realized that what was happening to you folks, a lot of you folks, and my friends I didn't like, and information is power. So I took it upon myself to inform myself about this business of diet and disease, and do I really want to continue to eat fish because I need my omega-3s, and should I really eat lean meat, and what should I do? And I went to a lecture very much like this, and one of my friends got up there and said, don't eat fish, here's why, and he showed me studies and scientific evidence that I shouldn't eat fish. And I left that night with my cute girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and I said to her in the car, do you ever want to eat fish again? And she looked at me and she said, no. And we haven't. And that was 7 years ago. We didn't talk about that fish is yummy. And we really like that sushi restaurant that we used to go to every week. And how about going in the canoe and catching the fish and putting them on the barbecue? We didn't have that discussion. Why? Why? Why didn't we have that discussion? We didn't have that. I'll tell you why. Because we were interested in our health and hoping to have a long, healthy, vital life together. And we've never touched fish again. It's that easy. It was taking the knowledge we have to get results. So we made a few changes. So we started off with fish. And then we said, well, what else should we learn about? We learned how to sprout. So if you want to learn how to sprout, come and see me downstairs later on. So we're addicted to sprouts now. And then we decided that, well, how about this calcium milk story? Let's learn about that. Oh, well, we should stop doing that. So we did. And then we kind of went to the meat thing. And so we went through a process. So today, I'm summarizing 7 years of knowledge, which has nothing to do with the letters after my name, to try to get you guys a jump start. So you don't have to take 7 years to get to the point that I'm at. You can do it very, very quickly. And we'll talk about strategies later on. So what I eat and the way I go through my life, a lot of people think is extreme. And I love it. I love it. I think it's really cool. Why? Because I get up in the mornings and I don't get up like I used to, and I don't have stiff joints, and I can be active and do whatever I want. And if I do get an injury, I recover way faster. And you know what? Food is fun, and it's yummy, and you should never, ever, 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 did I say ever? Ever sacrifice yummy for healthy, okay? So in your journey to become healthier, do not sacrifice yummy for healthy. So let's talk about deception. Why is this so hard to do? Well, it's so hard to do because you're told to do things that feel good, but they may be bad for you. And I have a little picture up there of the sacred plant. Next. And then you're doing bad things, but when you switch to doing good things, they don't feel so good. And that makes it difficult. It's a challenge to move forward and progress. And I give the example of low-fat ice cream, right? So if you eat one kind of ice cream and then you switch to low-fat ice cream, I'd rather have that one. Okay? So you need to transition. Back to the smartphones. Smartphones aren't that smart. We've never been so misinformed in our life, in the history of the human race. We have now at our fingertips all this amazing information, but did you know that 50% is there purposely to mislead you? So you can look at people's opinions, and they may or may not be wrong, or right or wrong, but purposely they're out there to mislead you. The other 50%, you got to figure out who to believe and who not, and what's real and what's not, right? Because science is an evolution. Science, we don't have the answers in science. As David Suzuki talked about, we have a hypothesis and a theory on how things work, and then we test it, and then we go, oh, that was good or wasn't good, and if it was good, great, let's do some more, and if it wasn't good, then we'll go in this direction, right? That's what science is. So what I'm telling you today, next week I might tell you something slightly different. Based on science, our knowledge evolves. But sitting in the chairs there, why the heck should you believe me? Right? Who's this guy? Well, I'm going to answer that question before it comes up. Because I'm not here to sell anything. I'm here because I'm sick and tired, and I don't want you to be sick and tired anymore. I'm here to share the information that I've been able to distill over the last 7 years. And the message that you've already heard today, and you will continue to hear, is the same message. So if you're really listening, the good message and the real message and the truth does continue to come out. So keep listening. And of course, the motivations of your informers, right? So as you heard, Monsanto's going out and doing these wonderful things, teaching kids in schools. Wonderful, fantastic. What are they teaching? Because what are they trying to sell? Next. And as far as the deception goes, when you go to the airport, you see that thing on the right side, and Chopra talked about our governments, and you go on the right side, and they teach you about recycling, and when you drop your newspaper in the top and your cans on the side and the bottles on the other side, they all go into the same bin. And I put this slide up here because you don't think people are out to deceive you when you're buying pepper, right? Never mind a million things I could have chosen, but I chose pepper. Why? Because McCormick's used to sell black pepper, and you've all seen it, and it's an 8-ounce container for whatever, and they kind of had their shareholders meeting and said, well, we need to make more money. How are we going to make more money? Well, we could either charge more, but if we charge more for our pepper, nobody's going to buy it. Why don't we just change the can? Okay, let's put 25% less pepper in there and sell it for the same price. Cool. So the can on the right, the red one, is their new can. And the poor guys on the right, the far right, Watkins is selling 8 ounces of pepper in a smaller can. Right? So they actually sued McCormick's because they changed their can without telling anybody. So even when you're buying pepper, you got to read the label. Right? Pepper. And then I kind of talked about my friends and my colleagues and my doctors, and they really care about you, okay? My colleagues, we're in the business of helping people. That's why we get up in the mornings, most of us. So this is a patient that was sent to me with a hand problem, and the history is that they've had a knee replaced and another knee, a couple of back surgeries, a few polyps, a stent to LAD, that means a stent in their left anterior descending artery, so they've had a bypass or a stent placed in their artery, and they've had hypertension, a little bit of osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, they're on a CPAP machine, type 2 diabetes, sugars are a little high, C80 is coronary artery disease, okay, and CKD is chronic kidney disease. This is a list of medications on the right side. So the referral from the doctor says, can you please see this man? He's got stable disease. He is otherwise well. So this is what happens to people. You just throw your hands up in the air and go, what do I do? Well, maybe the government's going to help me. So let's go to the USDA guidelines and see what they have to say. And they'll tell you that you need to get 15 to 30% of your calories from protein and 15 to 35% of your calories from fat. And that's what I think. So next, but we're in Canada, right? So let's go to the Canada Food Guide. So I went to the Canada Food Guide, and this is a beautiful rainbow. I love it. And I read it, and then I read it, and I read it, and I kept staring at it, and I couldn't understand it. I'm sorry, right? I just couldn't. And I used to try to follow that pyramid thing, which kind of made sense, but if you tried to eat that food, you couldn't, because you just couldn't. And the Canada Food Guide now, I think, is an absolute disaster. Sorry. Yeah, we're in Canada, but I think it's a disaster. I just find it really, really complicated. And I've tried. I really have. So you can just go, well, I'm just going to eat normal food, right? I'm just going to eat normal food, you know. Narini's depriving himself, eating all that green stuff. I'm just going to eat normal food. So this is normal, right? This is what you eat in restaurants. You got your bacon-wrapped filet and you know, meat and potatoes, and on the top you got, you know, a little bit of green because of the plate, otherwise it would look too boring. And on the right, you know, that's a normal meal, right? Pepsi and some chicken fingers, whatever those are, and those other things. And then we'll top it off with a little something, which is about all the calories that I eat in a whole day, right? So that's normal food. What I was going to show you was the start of a new, relatively new documentary. It's called What the Health. Has anybody heard of it? Yeah. What the Health? Yeah. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. It is on Netflix. It's amazing. A couple of other favorite things. I mentioned Plant Pure Nation, another amazing documentary. And there's one called Forks Over Knives. Those are a couple of the resources that are, you know, because I'd rather watch a movie than read a book, right? So they're kind of fun. So let's talk about this. So let me make it easy for you. What should you not eat? If it has feathers, fins, and fur, don't eat it. If it comes from something with feathers, fins, and fur, don't eat it. That's it. Eat everything else. But where do you get your protein? So how much protein is in spinach? So how much protein is in spinach? Anybody know? About 50% of the protein, of the calories come from protein. So if you eat a sirloin steak, you get about 50% protein, animal protein, and you get about 50% fat, depending on the cut of meat. When you eat spinach, you get tons of fiber, you get tons of nutrients, you get tons of vitamins and minerals, and you get about 50% protein. So this is purposely small, I don't want you to be able to read it, but jeffnovick.com is the website where it comes from, and it's a chart showing you protein. And it shows you the percentage of calories from protein for all these different foods. And if you look at these foods, and they're just plant-based foods, it'd be very difficult to find food on there that doesn't have enough protein to satisfy your daily requirements. So if we compare plants to animals and zoom in, so we're going to take equal parts of potatoes, tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes, and compare that to beef, pork, chicken, and whole milk. So if you take the same proportion of those things and we compare the nutrient. So zoom in again. So on the middle is the plant-based, and on the right is the animals. So if you want cholesterol, you need to eat animals. If you want fat in your diet, eat animals. If you want protein, they're about the same. If you want beta-carotene, fiber, vitamin C, folate, the list goes on and on and on, eat plants. Calcium. Remember we talked about milk, you've got to drink your milk for calcium? So you get about twice as much calcium in the plants compared to the animal-based products, and that's drinking whole milk. And if you look at fiber, it's 0, and it's 31% on the plant-based. So back to the protein story. So if you need to figure out how much protein you need in your diet and you want to eat plants, you don't need to figure out how much protein you need in your diet. You just eat plants. It doesn't matter what you eat, you will get enough protein in your diet. All right, simple as that. If you have specific questions about protein, we can talk about it later. But it's one of the things that people are so worried about. So if I can eat plants, how do I do it right? I can eat normal food, and I showed you what a picture of normal food is, and you do it right. So burger and fries and a Coke or a Pepsi, depending on your Dr. Pepper. And that's okay, and that's a balanced diet, right? But now I'm going to eat spinach and potatoes and lima beans and carrots, and I have to figure out how to do it right. You don't. Just eat it. Okay? It's real simple. Just eat it. So my transition advice is this. You can do what we did and spend 7 years trying to get to it took us about 2 years to get to the point we're at. Or you can do it a little bit at a time. And what I recommend people do, if you want to switch to a whole food plant-based diet, which is what you should be eating, then just take one meal a week. And if you eat 3 times a day, which you shouldn't, but if you eat 3 times a day, it's 21 meals a week. So if you go home and you get inspired, and Monday you say, you know what, we're going to have meatless Monday. Or hang on, let's just have meatless breakfast Monday. Right? Just one meal. Don't eat meat. Don't eat animal products. Which means your milk and your yogurt. And see how the day goes. And then the second week you say, well, okay, meatless Monday, but it's just going to be Monday breakfast and lunch. And then the third week is going to be breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you're going to have a total meatless Monday. And you do that, well, it's going to take you 21 weeks. But you can get to the point where you're eating just plants. You're going to feel better, you're going to have more energy, you're going to lose some weight, your diabetes is going to go away, your heart disease is going to go away, your chance of getting cancer is going to be way, way less. You're just going to feel way better. Next. So what I suggest to people is set some goals and achieve them. Take that knowledge, as the other Dr. Phil said, and use it to get the results that you deserve and that you can have. Next. And we'll just leave that up at the end. And these are some of my favorite places to go to get information. And on the 12th of November, we're doing another similar kind of thing in Coburg. And the gentleman by the name of Dr. Brian Clements is going to be there, who runs the Hippocrates Health Institute. And he'll be speaking as well. And it's definitely worth the price of admission and the trip. So I'm going to basically stop there. Okay? Yeah.
Give it up for Dr.
We have such great speakers. I can't believe how good this is. Okay, now the next speaker is another amazing speaker that Diane's going to introduce.
Okay, I've been given the pleasure of introducing our final guest speaker, David Brooke. So being in the fashion industry taught David the importance of taking care of his overall health and skin. Due to climate change and endless amounts of products applied to his skin on any given day, he struggled for many years to find an organic product line to help him maintain the healthy, even skin complexion demanded by the fast-paced fashion industry. David's passion for organics, dedicated to chemical-free living, and a valuable industry insight has been a driving force propelling Skin Essence to become an industry leader of superior organic products. So please help me welcome to the stage David Brooke.
Thanks a lot. Hey guys, how you doing? Some pretty big shoes to fill, guys. So honestly, it's such a privilege to be here. Definitely props to Rachel and obviously Dr. Phil and Dr. Phil again, you know, for really trying to bring a community and create awareness. I know sitting out there, you probably initially think like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make this change? I mean, it just seems so overbearing. I have to change everything I do. Really, it's as simple as what do you put in your grocery cart? What goes in your fridge? If it ain't there, you ain't going to eat it. So I think it's about making healthy choices. It is difficult at first, but it becomes easy because it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes your new normal in a sense, you know? A lot of times, you know, people get stuck in, you know, eating and behaving in a certain way that the rest of their neighbors might. But at the end of the day, if you look at them and go, do I want to look and feel the way they feel, or do I want to be different and better? Not being better from an ego perspective, but being better from a health perspective. So it really comes down to that. If you make good choices, you will probably have good health. It's not necessarily inherited. Genetics will take you so far, but it's making good choices that's really going to set you apart. So, and on top of that too, the control is in your hands. You know, you can't control everything in life, but you can definitely control what you eat and what you put on your body. You can't necessarily control the air you breathe, but if you take control of the things you can, then you definitely will make a difference for yourself. And I think, but I just want to start off my presentation really quickly just by asking a question. First of all, who in the audience uses personal care products? That's like shampoos, moisturizers. Every hand should go up if you have ever used personal care products, right? Everybody. How many of you, honestly, because I know obviously after this you're going to feel guilty and like, oh, I want to say I read the ingredients. How many people with your personal care products actually read the ingredients before you make a purchase? Good. How many of you know, honestly, because I will pop this, how many of you actually understand those ingredients? So yes, it's one thing to read it. It's another thing to make an educated decision based on whether or not you're going to purchase that. Actually understand the ingredients. One. You see? And that's okay. That's honestly normal because these chemicals and a lot of these additives are hard to understand. To be honest with you, I can't pronounce half of them. If I can't pronounce it, it ain't going on my body. Right? So I guess I do have a PowerPoint slide. I'll probably do the same thing Dr. Phil did, just get through a few. But long story short, the skin is your body's largest organ. It absorbs statistically about 60 to 80% of what you put on it. Chemicals absorb into the body a lot quicker than even natural ingredients will. So it's important to be aware of what you put on your body. One thing to think about is when you eat something unhealthy, not only is it regulated by Health Canada, which we know the regulations are brutal, but there is a sense of somewhat of regulation. The skincare industry might surprise you to know that it's self-regulated, meaning we regulate ourselves. We are not regulated by anybody. There is 62,000, which I'll get into in one of the slides, over 62,000 chemicals that have been grandfathered into our industry that we're allowed to use at our discretion. Any new ones have to be tested, but 62,000 is probably enough as it is. Anyway, so with the skin, it's really important to understand that, you know, if you really want to achieve true holistic health, if you want to be the healthiest you that you can be, you have to eat well. You have to sleep well, you gotta drink good water, and you gotta use good personal care products. Because personal care products contain a variety of carcinogens, hormone disruptors, tetragens, a variety of different chemicals that can cause illnesses, disease, and just overall issues for you from a health perspective. So if we skip to the next slide, I don't need to give you an anatomy lesson on the skin too much, but obviously the skin is important for us. It protects us from UV rays, pathogens, water loss, helps to regulate our body temperature. I don't need to push the fact that obviously the skin is a big part of our body. I'll go to the next slide. Most skin, and you know what, a lot of this stuff too, when I do a workshop, if you have specific questions, I can definitely answer them in that. You know, for example, most people seek skincare products because their skin's dry. Their skin's oily, or maybe it's sensitive, right? And there's ways to address that using plant ingredients. For example, if you have oily prone skin, most people will say, well, I have really oily prone skin, which is basically your sebaceous glands, your oil producing glands, Their job, when they become dry, which oftentimes they become dry because you're using, number one, soap, detergents, and alcohols to wash your skin, what they'll do is they'll then send messages to the brain saying, we need to create oil, right? So they're going to start to secrete oil. So most people would think that if you put a plant oil on your skin, it's going to, why would I do that? I already have oily skin, why would I do that, right? But really, if you think about it, oil goes through the epidermis, into the dermis, hydrates around those glands, which is where a lot of the anti-aging aspects will actually take place. You don't want just like a cream would sit on the surface. Oils go into the skin, they hydrate around those glands, they help to achieve the pH balance of about 5.5, which then the glands don't need to send messages to the brain to secrete more oil because they've already been satisfied. So actually treating oily prone skin using, plant extracts, for example, is the way to go, because creams, when they sit on the surface, the glands still feel dehydrated. They're going to send messages trying to secrete oil. The oil can't get out because the waxes from the cream are clogging the pores, thus causing things like breakouts and blackheads and so on. The reason why companies make creams is because they're 60 to 80% water, waxes, emulsifiers, and plant oils. Our company, we're 100% at the mercy of of nature, right? So a lot of motives, like what was mentioned actually earlier on in the presentations, a lot of corporations, their motive is profit margins, maximizing for their shareholders and so on. It's not really necessarily what's best for you. If you want them to make what's best for you, don't buy their crap, basically. Because corporations will make what they know they can make money on, right? So if we go to the next slide, eczema, rosacea. A lot of people get affected by eczema and rosacea. As mentioned to you by Dr. Phil, a lot of doctors try to take the how can we treat it, but really there's a lot of ways to prevent it and avoid it to begin with. Eczema is an internal condition that's typically caused by things like dairy in your diet, sometimes gluten, refined sugars, sometimes stress, but predominantly it's a diet-related condition that people are always trying to address by using topical applications. Well, steroids is a completely different conversation, antibiotics, right? But the thing is, it's not actually going to, it might help you with some of the symptoms, but really getting rid of the cause, I think, is a really great approach with anything to do with your health, right? Rosacea, I can talk about that as well later on. Come up if you have that challenge with your skin. I can definitely coach you with some great tactics on helping to age gracefully and help that not to continue to be an issue for you. The next slide there. Perfect. That's a good point. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, if you would not put it in your mouth, why would you put it on your skin? And most people never thought about that. Like when I actually was even showing the product to one of the ladies before, I told her, I'm like, it was one of our facial cleansers. And I was like, try it. And at first I think she was like a little bit hesitant. And then she went ahead and tried it. She's like, wow, it's actually pretty good. I'm like, yeah, she never thought about the idea of putting something like that in their mouth because you've always thought personal care products, chemicals, preservatives, synthetic fragrances, and so on. But really, if you can't put it in your mouth, if it's not real, like if you want to be real healthy, you got to eat real food. There's no tricks to it. If you want your skin to be healthy, you have to use real ingredients. It's like, if you want to become full, you can eat a bag of chips. If you want to become full and healthy, you can eat a salad. If you want to get moisturized, use Estee Lauder. If you want to get nourished, use real stuff, Plant extracts, rose seeds, jojobas, apricot kernels, macadamias, sweet orange extracts. If you want vitamin C, you don't need the ascorbic acid that every other company will use because it's processed and cheaper. Use products that have things like sweet orange, apricot kernel, neroli, rosehip. Your body will absorb it a lot better and use it a lot more efficiently as well. So when you look at this as well, when it comes to like the absorption of chemicals, the composition of chemicals to which the skin is exposed, so really chemicals will penetrate into the body. One of the fastest ways into the bloodstream, other than through needles, is actually through your skin, right? A lot of these chemicals will go to the surface of your skin and penetrate into your skin within seconds, thus going into your bloodstream and so on. And a lot of these chemicals, well, for example, you were talking about meeting with Monsanto. I met one of the head guys. I'm not even going to name drop this company, but it's a big company. It was at an industry, presentation, if you will. And I approached him. I said, why does your company use so many chemicals and preservatives and synthetic fragrances and so on in your products? And his answer was, because they don't really want to get into that kind of stuff, right? They don't even know, to be honest with you. They're just one of the top people in the company, and their job is just to make sure that the money's coming in, right? But his answer was, well, we don't really use enough to really hurt anybody. It's in such small amounts. And my thought was, okay, well, a lot of BS right there. But on top of that, they don't consider the fact that that customer isn't just using that moisturizer. That customer is cleansing with one of their products. They're using moisturizer, maybe exfoliants, shampoos. They're getting a cocktail, so it really does add up. And they're not also considering the fact that most customers are using products on a daily basis, morning and night, every single day, right? So although you might look at one application and thinking, well, it's not so bad, says who? I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, if I can't put it in my mouth, I'm not putting it on my skin, you know? If it's not healthy, you know, if it's not a healthy, safe product, you know, why take that chance, you know? And then also, too, on the bottom, it says the average female is exposed to a mixture of 200 toxic chemicals on her daily routine. Men is about 100 because we just don't tend to use as many different, you know, personal care products. And studies have shown that teens are actually much higher, because especially female teenagers, because they're using a variety of different, you know, hair dyes and nail polishes and perfumes is a big thing as well. And from the sample of 1,025 people studied by the FDA, every one of them tested positive for phthalates in their bloodstream, which is a known hormone disruptor, and it can also be a possible issue for birth defects. So the fact that there is so many different challenges out there from a health perspective with cancers, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart disease, and so on, it's not a coincidence. You know, and if you look at it, that issue is a lot more prominent in first world countries, because we're also, you know, at the mercy of all these massive corporations. You know, so it's really something to consider, and it's not. I don't think the point to any of our talks is to scare people, but I think it's to maybe more or less empower you and maybe encourage you to make better choices. Because if you make better choices, you're going to end up most likely with better health as well. So we'll go to the next slide. Cool. Concerns with conventional skincare. So these are just a couple major, you know, aspects of you know, why you might want to avoid conventional. So chemical preservatives are used to keep products stable, which can also be obviously a link to a variety of health issues. So companies want to make as much money as they can, right? They also want to be able to sell to Walmart, for example. So if you're making a product, first of all, actually here's something to think about. And I always tell people this as well, is like almost on a daily basis. The best thing for a plant in nature, the best way to grow a healthy plant is with sunlight, water, and oxygen. You need it. You have to have it, right? Those three things, funny enough, are actually the same three things that are terrible for a plant oil once you take it out of the plant, once you extract it. Therefore, using stuff like water in a product, if you want to really break it down and make it easy, when you're looking at personal care products, see if the first ingredient's water or aqua. It's obviously the same thing. They try to get all fancy, but if the first ingredient's water, not only is it a cheap filler, and they're trying to make as much money as they can, but they have to use preservatives, because water makes natural things go rancid. It's just like if you put water on some grains, for example, or you just let grains dry. A year later, the grains are probably still going to be maybe a little stale, but there's going to be mold and rancidity on anything that water is added to. So companies use it as a cheap filler. So it's a really good way to read your ingredients. If you look at water, you know they got to use preservatives or something to restabilize it. So first of all, a good, true, holistic product should not use water. Number two, oxygen. Right? A lot of these products you're finding, there are a lot of twist caps where air can enter into them, right? So oxygen can actually cause, especially plant oils that are high in omega-3s, which you're talking about from a food perspective. Omega-3s for the skin help to strengthen skin tissue. So as we get older, skin cells don't heal themselves as fast. But omega-3s actually help the skin to heal itself at a faster rate. But omega-3s are also at the mercy of oxidization. They're much more prone to oxidizing. Therefore, you know, looking for a product that's got an airtight container is also something not only will naturally preserve it, but keep it fresher for you as well. And then sunlight. UV light can break down the molecular structure, the nutritional benefit of a lot of these plants after they're extracted. So looking for something that's protected in UV amber glass. Plus, in glass, if you take a plastic bottle and you squeeze it and you let it go, it contracts and expands. That allows air in and out of the package. So glass is the best way to do it. As we get to the next slide, I'll explain something about that. Actually, go back to that other one real quick. Did you guys read a couple of those things when I was rambling there? Yeah, a little bit? Okay. Yeah, so water, mineral. Okay, mineral oil too, anyways. That's a carcinogen. People see minerals, and maybe to the educated person there, they realize to stay away from mineral oil, but a lot of people look at it like, oh, mineral oil looks like, oh, it's infused with minerals. Nice. That's not the case. So these are a couple of the major ingredients to avoid, and I'm actually going to break down. So this kind of explains what a paraben is, what a phthalate is, sodium lauryl sulfate. By the way, this is an interesting point, and then you're going to be able to see some of the ingredients on a future slide, what those chemicals are actually called that would be classified as, you know, like a phthalate, for example, right? So sodium lauryl and sodium laureth sulfate, they're added to cleansers and shampoos and stuff. They're the bubbling, foaming action that you get. You know when a lot of people, they get a cleanser, like, oh, it bubbles up so good, I feel so clean, and that really dry, tight, cracked feeling you get after? You know what I mean? And a lot of people associate that with clean. Like, if they wash their face, let's say, for example, with an organic cleanser, you know, you're going to feel smooth and hydrated after. You're not going to feel stripped. But a lot of people associate that dehydrated, oh yeah, my skin feels really clean, and then they got to rehydrate it. That can cause a lot of broken capillaries, thinning of the skin, a lot of damage, right? The whole point to washing your face is washing your face, not stripping it. The problem is, the cheapest way to make a cleanser is using soaps, detergents, and alcohols. Therefore, most companies will do it like that. Now, sodium lauryl sulfate, it's interesting that is it 20 countries now, or 21 countries in the EU? I don't know, does anyone know? I think because of Brexit, maybe it's 20. The whole point is, in the EU, every single country in the EU has banned sodium lauryl and sodium laureth sulfate from all of their ingredients. And I know that because we actually sell to Europe, right? It's completely banned. You cannot have it on the market. But yet in North America, we still allow it in our products because they know it's a known carcinogen. So not only does it bubble and foam up, but it also will penetrate the skin at a very fast rate. And like I mentioned, numerous studies have actually shown that it's a known carcinogen. So cancer-causing agent. Go to the next slide there. Fragrances. Interesting. So a lot of people will ask me, or they'll say, for example, I have really sensitive skin. Oftentimes people are actually sensitive to the synthetic components that are added to it, not necessarily anything that's organic in it. It would be more like the preservatives, the synthetic fragrances. Like, for example, there might be some people, anyone in the audience, if you're around perfumes, your eyes start to water and get irritated? Anyone? Yeah, a couple hands, quite a few hands, yeah. So companies actually, especially in personal care products, they don't actually even have to say if they use a synthetic fragrance. Even though synthetic fragrances are known to be allergens, they have carcinogenic properties to them as well, companies, we don't have to list that as even an ingredient. And the reason is, it's hard to see, but it's a bold, it's a trade secret. So they've actually been able to lobby against the government saying, we don't want to talk about that because that's a trade secret, because really most of their products are all made about the same way. Water, waxes, emulsifiers, maybe infused with jasmine oil that's surrounded by a bunch of chemicals, which really isn't going to give you any benefit. But they've actually been able to lobby to say that that's our trade secret. We don't want to, disclose what that is, but what kind of trade secret is something that's completely synthetic, that's only meant to smell good? At the end of the day, it's not always about how something smells or how it appears, but it's really what's it made of and how good is it for you is something that I think that you should consider for sure. If we go to the next one. Cool. So you can see some of these right here. So for skin irritants, hormone disruptors, allergenic toxins, you'll see that these are a couple of the names that you might see on the side of your bottles. The studies have shown that they can actually cause the irritations they can cause. Glass and plastic. I kind of spoke a little bit about that and how glass doesn't allow oxygen into a product. But another reason why companies won't use glass, even though it's better, is number one, sure, it's breakable, but if you buy good quality glass, it's not as breakable. But on top of that, not only does it cost more to buy that package, and it all comes down to profit margins, right? But also it's heavier, so therefore it costs more to ship. So a lot of times companies will make decisions that's not better for the customer and better for the product, but is better for the margins. But at the end of the day, you knowing that, you're able to make better choices as you hit the marketplace yourself. We already talked a lot about foods, so I'll let you guys just have a quick look at this as I go through it, but these are some components that you'll find, like some vitamins, for example, that are really important for the skin. Certain types of foods, as long as it's non-GMO and organic, of course, but that you can find some of these nutrients from. Vitamin C helps to stimulate collagen, improving elasticity in the skin. Vitamin E, we all know about that. And that's the thing is too, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to achieve great skin health, It really comes down to a whole lifestyle choice. You know, if you eat well, you sleep well, you drink lots of water, and use good quality products, you're going to look and feel good, 100%. You know, the issue is you get a lot of people that like to go to the gym and then hit McDonald's on the way home to reward themselves, right? If you're someone that eats super well, but then you're putting chemicals on your skin every single day, you know, your good diet will only take you so far. Same as the other way around. If you're using a great quality product, let's say for example like our brand, but then you're not eating well, it's only going to take you so far. So it's really, it's a complete lifestyle choice. And I definitely, you know, I eat well. I try to sleep as well as I can. I use great quality products. For me, I definitely follow suit with that. And I know at first it was such a huge change for myself, but it's something that became easier and easier as time went on. It just becomes, like I mentioned, your new normal. The next slide. Be informed. You know, at the end of the day, the power is in your pocket. It's your wallet, it's your credit card, it's your choice, it's your grocery basket, it's your fridge, it's your house. You know, if you make educated decisions, then you're probably going to find yourself in a good spot from a health perspective. EWG, anyone heard of EWG? Environmental Working Groups, Indeed? Check out this website. They actually oversee 72,000 different companies, like, and their products. Most companies don't want to be on it because it really calls them for what they are. It calls the kettle black, right? But with that, you can actually search any product that you probably have in your home. It will actually grade them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the cleanest, 10 being the most toxic, and explain to you the ingredients that are found in those products and why and what they're linked to from a health condition. And it's a non-for-profit organization. It's not something that's like manipulated. Like, we can't pay to be on it to get better ratings. It's something that we're proud to be on because it makes us look great, but a lot of companies wouldn't. But definitely check that out because it'll make it easy for you to understand and to make better choices.
It feels like we're cutting you off.
Someone's got to do it because I'd probably just keep going.
I'm the same way. Somebody usually has to pull the hook for me. So what I wanted to just piggyback on is the next slide. I want to show some very gross slides here. And they're gross. And they don't have to be this way. Our conventional food system is interfering with our health. So almost all the speakers, they talked about 4 of the fundamentals, but they missed the one, in our opinion, is a very great one, which I'm going to let Dr. Amar speak of. But we have what we call the 5 fundamentals to address this. I originally got this from the Harvard Med School lifestyle program that I went through, that Dr. Amar's going through right now. And so we know, and people were alluding to genetics may cause 5 to 10% of health problems. We know even cancer is a preventable disease. We know this. The research shows it, clinical research and scientific research. There are so many doctors doing this. Even your genetics that are programmed, like Dr. Ornish has discovered with early stage prostate cancer, that your genes reverse to not being cancerous when you go through a lifestyle program. Okay, so you have the power in your hands. So what we wanted you to know is that we're seeing this in our office with people coming in with diabetic neuropathies, foot ulcers like this, heart attacks, people that have had these things. They don't have to be. And that's why we created our 5 fundamental challenge for you. This is directly correlated. The next slide, please. This next slide with cancer with children is the fastest rising cancer of all cancers, is childhood cancer. It is a direct correlation to what you're eating and what's in your environment. It's got to stop, is what it's got to do. And it's the people in this room that are going to take the action that we need. Like Rachel said, email your MP. We're going to have action steps for you in that 21-day challenge. So please, no matter if you're going to do it for yourself, do it for your kids and your grandkids. That's what we need to do. So the 5 fundamentals is in page 4 of your digital agenda. And if you don't have it, when you get home, you'll be able to download it. It's all in there. And it'll explain what we're going to do. We need to check you on the other fundamentals.
So I'm just going to discuss the 5 fundamentals here. Like Dr. Phil has already mentioned, a lot of the speakers already addressed the mindset, exercise, nutrition, and detoxification. But we want to make sure your nerve supply is working like it should. So that's what we do at our office. We're going to check that when you come in for your exam. So if you think about it, if you're eating amazing food, you're eating organic, local, all that good stuff, but the nerves that are supplying your digestive organs, your stomach, aren't working the way they're supposed to, there's no way you're going to actually absorb that food. You're going to just be passing it out. So if you haven't had your nervous system assessed, then you need to do that. So what we're actually offering is the roadmap to the 5 fundamentals.
So how many people have heard of the 5 fundamentals before? Okay, so this leads us to the next thing, which is, how many people need to know about the 5 fundamentals? Should we keep it a secret? Like, isn't it usually the people that are here that are already doing the most anyway? Is this true? So pat yourselves on the back. Thank you for coming, even though you already know this. And if you fall off track like I do, these events are really good. So come, even if you know all about the 5 fundamentals, come and be around the people. It's a different, is this not a different energy in here? We're vibrating at a different frequency because of what we do in our life. So we're going to have that same environment in our office at the 5 fundamentals roadmap. Be with other like-minded people.
And another thing that we should mention is that Dr. Phil and I and the rest of the Welcome to Wellness team, we like doing these talks, we like doing lunch and learns where we can teach information about what real health is. So if you're interested in us doing a guest appearance somewhere, just let us know and we'll make sure we can coordinate that as well.
We're going to eat lunch now, and really we're all blessed to have these speakers here. Thank you guys, we love and appreciate you so much, and thanks for all our guests.
I want to thank all our amazing vendors. Thank you very much.
You did an amazing job. Thank you very much, Diane, for managing this whole event and putting it together.